Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, November 3rd. At Squamish, Oemayo. As always, we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. Motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. With all of our electronically held meetings, approved Ministerial Order M192 that the district is ensuring openness, transparency, accessibility, and accountability at this meeting by the following means. This meeting is being live streamed. A video of this meeting will be available on the district's website for viewing on an on-demand basis. The meeting is open to the public for electronic participation, and limited public attendance is available at Brennan Park Recreation Center. So if there's a councillor that would like to move that. Moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor French. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Because we are holding this meeting electronically, just remind the public and members of council of our few rules. Members attending the meeting electronically are required to advise the chair of the following circumstances: when a council member disconnects or reconnects, so that this can be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. Council members are to identify themselves when they advise the chair that they wish to speak by raising their hand if they're connected by video, or simply saying chair if they are connected by audio only. With respect to a vote, council members are only required to state a nay vote. No statement is required if the member is in favor. I ask everyone tonight to keep their phone or computer on mute. Staff, council, the public, unless it is your turn to speak. Council members shall be involved in and participate in the meeting. Council members shall text the corporate officer if they're having technical difficulties. And if we're having technical difficulties on our end, we will recess the meeting for up to 10 minutes so that we can sort that out. We've had a pretty smooth go of things through public hearings and other development permits with variances. So I do ask the public that if we run into a little glitch, we are got lots of staff here to help us work that out. So please be patient, and we'll make sure that folks who do want to speak have the opportunity to do that. Okay, so the only thing on our agenda tonight is development permit number 539. This is for 41665 to 41707 Government Road. Should I read this first? Did you adopt the agenda? Yes, we adopt the agenda. The proponent and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard electronically, via telephone, or from your computer with respect to the proposed variances to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011. There is limited in-person attendance and participation available at Brennan Park for those who are unable to participate electronically or watch the live stream. There are 3 proposed variances to the zoning bylaw, and the proposed variances are outlined in the staff report. The first is a proposed variance to section 23.2. The maximum height be varied from 12.18 meters to 14.5 meters. The second proposed variance is to section 23.9 off-street parking requirements, that these be varied from 51 to 49. And the third variance proposed is to section 41.11, section B, sub 1, design criteria be varied to eliminate a small section of 2-meter wide landscape screening along the northern property line. Details to participate via telephone or the WebEx platform are displayed on the screen for those who have logged in from your computer or are watching the live stream of the meeting, and are included also on the district website. In order to get on the speakers list, please raise your hand, and so to do that via telephone, you press *3, or via WebEx by opening the participant panel and clicking on the hand icon. Please note that when it is your turn to speak, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box via WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the chat function if you're on WebEx to send the host a message, or email hearing@squamish.ca. I remind folks that this is not a public hearing. This is a hearing on variances related to a development permit. So speakers may only speak to the variances that are in front of council this evening. If you start to vary off of those variances, I will ask you to please limit your comments to the variances at hand. So with that, I will turn things over to staff for their presentation before going to the public. Over to you, Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mary Elliott. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning. Also with me tonight is Carleen Loudon, Environmental Coordinator with the Engineering Department. I'm here tonight to present Development Permit number 539. The subject property is located at 41665 to 41707 Government Road in Brackendale and is currently developed with the Brackendale General Store building, which houses the post office, the Crabapple Cafe, the general store, and 3 apartment units. The subject lands are zoned local commercial C1. The property to the south is also zoned C1, while other neighboring properties are zoned RS1 and RS2. The property has been zoned various versions of local commercial since the first zoning bylaw was adopted in the 1970s. The property is identified as a neighborhood node in Schedule C of the official community plan. The proposed development is located within a secondary floodway. Development Permit Area 2, protection from flood hazard guidelines will apply. Flood hazard and debris flow hazard are addressed through a separate delegated development permit, which has been conditionally approved pending issuance of DP 539. The application is also subject to Development Permit Area 1, environmental protection, and Development Permit Area 3, universal guidelines for form and character. The subject property is located within 30 meters of a fish-bearing watercourse and is subject to DPA 1, protection of the environment guidelines. The proposal meets the DPA 1 guidelines apart from a reduction in the streamside protection and enhancement area from 20 meters to 17.6 meters to allow for parking in a previously disturbed area. Staff are supportive of the reduction as it is in a previously disturbed, unvegetated area. The compensation proposed would enhance the remaining SPIA, and the 17.6 meter SPIA would still exceed the provincial requirements. The technical report has been reviewed by district staff in the environmental department, who have accepted the recommendations in the report. The province has also reviewed and accepted the proposal. The proponent has agreed to enter into an environmental protection covenant that will preserve the SPIA in perpetuity and preclude the development of a duplex at 41675 Government Road. The previous owners obtained an approved development permit to allow for the construction of a duplex at 41675 Government Road. The current owner has not submitted a building permit application for the duplex yet, pending the outcome of this application. This DP application seeks to allow for the construction of 2 mixed-use buildings while retaining the existing Brackendale General Store. Building A is 4 stories and consists of 15 rental apartments and 1 ground floor commercial unit. Building B is 4 stories and consists of 13 rental apartments and 1 ground floor commercial unit. The new commercial units are approximately 1,000 square feet each. The existing general store building consists of 3 apartment units and commercial on the ground floor. The development proposal meets the requirements of the C1 zoning. The C1 zone allows for 1 principal building per lot. Building A is located on its own parcel, meets the required setbacks, and is proposing an FSR of 0.75 and a lot coverage of 27%. Building B will be attached to the existing building on site by an elevated walkway and deck that will provide access between the buildings and to the shared deck and outdoor space. Building B meets the required setbacks and is proposing an FSR of 0.66 and a lot coverage of 30%. It should be noted that as part of the zoning bylaw update, staff intend to propose removing the 1 principal building per lot requirement in commercial zones as there are other density regulating provisions in place, and the requirement results in either buildings connected by accessory type structures or larger buildings. The proponent has agreed to enter into a housing agreement that would secure 6 of the studio units on site as moderate income rental housing. Moderate income rental housing units are rental units that offer a rate that is less than market rental, but do not qualify as affordable housing under the perpetually affordable housing policy. The moderate income units would be spread across each of the 3 buildings on site, 2 studio units in each of the new buildings and 2 studio units in the existing building. The rents associated with the moderate income rental units would be starting as follows. 2 studio units in building A at $1,050 per month or $1,050 per month, 2 studio units in building B at $1,050 per month, and 2 studio units in the existing building at $950 per month. These rents are approximately 20% lower than current market rent for studio apartments. While CMHC does not provide market rents for studio units in Squamish, a recently completed rental project has studio units listed for $1,425 per month. The 6 units represent 20% of the total units on site. The remaining 24 new apartment units and the 3-bedroom unit in the existing building will be secured as market rental in perpetuity. The housing agreement will be brought forward for readings should this development permit be approved. The new market rental units consist of a mix of studio, 1, and 2-bedroom units. All new units will have dedicated in-suite laundry. The building's form and character includes materials and forms that reflect the character of the Brackendale General Store. The building's massing is both defined by the simple sloped roof and dormers. The building's materials are taken from their context. Gable ends of each building are clad in wood, shingles and siding, a direct reference to the original heritage building, with street-facing shingles colored to make a direct link to the existing building's prominent red. The balance of the proposed buildings are clad generally in corrugated metal siding, a durable but common material in Squamish residential buildings. This new development does not propose any changes to the existing general store building other than an elevated walkway at the rear of the building that provides access to the deck and shared outdoor space on building B, and access to one of the suites in the existing general store building. The new buildings will be required to meet Step 4 of the BC Energy Step Code. The proponent has provided a statement of significance, outlining the heritage values and character-defining elements of the general store building, and has agreed to enter into a restrictive covenant that would require the owner to obtain an approval from the district that substantially complies with the recommendations of the statement of significance prior to the district issuing a demolition or building permit. This would provide staff with an additional tool to ensure original character elements of this building would be included in any redevelopment or major modification of the building, and would preclude the demolition of the general store building without approval for a development permit. Apologies. Currently, there is no such protection in place. Landscaping consists of native plants, such as Nootka rose and ferns, that support diversity within this riparian environment. The waste stream is located in an enclosed building behind the existing general store, adjacent to the loading bay. This location provides convenient access for both buildings, as well as the existing units in the general store building. The deck and covered dining portion of the common space is accessible through a lift located near the southern end of Building B. The lawn and informal play area are not directly connected except by stairs. The intent is to provide access to the lower lawn area via a gate accessible from the sidewalk on Government Road. All residential and commercial Class A bicycle parking spaces will be located within 1 meter of an electrical outlet. Class B bicycle parking is located adjacent to the drive aisle entry to the project, with parking for 6 bikes. There is another Class B bicycle parking rack adjacent to Building A, with parking for 4 bikes. The development is accessed off Government Road. Vehicle parking consists of surface parking at grade. The existing parking area is primarily crushed gravel and accommodates roughly 18 parking stalls. The parking area is located within the SPIA, will remain unpaved, and the design intent is the use of crushed gravel in GeoGrid, where required to maintain a permeable surface, and select areas of asphalt paving at the loading area and the high traffic area between the existing building and Building A. The proposed development requires 39 residential parking spaces, 10 commercial parking spaces, and 8 visitor parking spaces. The development is providing the 39 required parking spaces and requesting a variance to section 23.9 off-street parking of the C1 zone to allow for the required visitor parking spaces to be shared with the commercial parking spaces for a total of 49 off-street parking spaces. 2 of the shared visitor and commercial parking spaces located in front of Building A and 12 of the residential parking spaces located under the cover of the new buildings will be provided with access to electric vehicle charging receptacles. Notable frontage improvements that would be associated with this application would include relocating the existing bus stop south of the proposed development to the north of the general store in the district's road right-of-way. The existing bus stop is below standard and located next to a fish-bearing ditch. It must be relocated in order to be improved. There is sufficient space within the district road right-of-way to accommodate a new bus stop, sidewalk, and bike lane in front of 41727 Government Road. The sidewalk and bike lane would continue down in front of the existing general store building. The existing on-street parking stalls in front of the store would remain. A crosswalk will be improved to bring pedestrians to the existing sidewalk on the east side of Government Road. This development proposal is requesting 3 variances to the zoning bylaw. The first variance request is to section 23.3 to increase the maximum height from 12.18 meters to 14.5 meters. The maximum height in C1 is 10.68 meters. However, section 4.10D, maximum height of buildings and structures, allows for a 1.5 meter height bonus for areas with high flood construction levels, provided certain criteria are met, which this development qualifies for. Staff are supportive of the height variance request as the units are being secured as moderate income rental and market rental in perpetuity, and it would improve the livability of the units on the top floor of the building. The variance also facilitates a pitched roof design, which is consistent with the local character. Given the number of property constraints and aspirations, including preservation of the existing general store building and environmental setbacks, the project is very limited in its ability to expand the building's footprint. This slide shows the elevations of both buildings with the maximum allowable height highlighted in green and the requested height highlighted in red. The second variance request is to section 23.9 to allow for the required 8 visitor parking stalls to be shared with the commercial parking stalls. The proponent has provided a trip generation and parking review study that confirms that the 39 required stalls for residential units would be provided and that 10 stalls remain that could be shared between the required commercial and visitor parking stalls. The zoning and bylaw requirement for this development would be 57 stalls. The report highlights that based on Table 2, shared parking percentages by peak period, a deficiency of 8 stalls during the peak period of weekend morning and afternoon may occur based on the residential and commercial classes of use. It should be noted that there is no differentiation between required residential parking spaces and required visitor parking spaces in Table 2 under the residential class of use. Given the residential use class is not based on the visitor parking stalls, the peak demand percentage is likely much higher than would be associated with visitor parking. The report also states that the new development should not have a negative impact on the traffic and parking in the surrounding neighborhood. The expected increase in additional vehicle trips would equate to 1 vehicle entering or exiting the site every 2.5 to 4 minutes during peak hours period, which the report states is a minor change. Staff support the variance request as it is common for visitor and commercial parking to be shared. There are examples of other mixed-use zones, such as MUD 1, that allow for shared commercial and visitor parking. This project is providing moderate income rental and market rental housing. It is preserving the existing general store building, preserving the environmentally sensitive area, and the addition of commercial space on the ground floor would be enhancing the existing neighborhood node. Given all of these constraints, staff are supportive of the parking variance. The third variance request is to section 41.11 BI, design criteria, to eliminate a small section of 2 meter wide landscape screening along the northern property line. Providing the 2 meter wide landscape strip in this location would result in the loss of 2 parking stalls, as they would no longer meet the minimum dimensions. There is an existing fence along the northern property line, and the proponent has offered to construct a trellis with climbing vines to screen the parking stalls in this location. The trellis and screening will be included as a condition of the development permit, and maintenance of the screening will be included as a requirement of the environmental covenant. Staff are supportive of this variance request as it would accommodate 2 required parking stalls, and the screening proposed by the proponent would serve the same purpose as the required 2-meter planting strip. The proposed buildings and site design meet the objectives and guidelines of Development Permit Area 3. Staff reviewed the project with an approach to balance the competing objectives of maintaining the existing building on site, preserving the environmentally sensitive areas, providing rental housing, and enhancing an existing neighborhood node. The proposed development meets a number of OCP policies, including the ones listed here associated with neighborhood nodes. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. A development proposal sign was installed on the property and the project was advertised on the development showcase. An online public information meeting was held on the Story Maps platform for 1 month. Variance notification was delivered to properties within 100 meters. A high number of public comments were received. The majority of the comments received were not in support of the variances. As noted, the majority of the public concerns were related to parking and the overall height and density of the building. While these present valid concerns, staff feel that the project is addressing a number of important items, such as the preservation of the environmentally sensitive area, the preservation of the existing general store, providing additional ground floor commercial space in a neighborhood node, and providing moderate income rental and market rental housing in a neighborhood of predominantly single unit development. As such, staff are supportive of the requested variances. So staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize development permit number 530, subject to the conditions listed on the screen. Staff also requests that the following variances to section 23.2, maximum height, 23.9, off-street parking, and section 41.11 BI design criteria of the zoning bylaw be included in development permit number 539 as noted in the staff report. After further discussions with the proponent, staff feel that the application has been pushed to the point where any major changes to the development would not be feasible under the current layout. Should council not be interested in approving the DP 539 as proposed, staff feel that it would be best for council to defeat development permit number 539 and allow the proponent to come back with a substantially revised proposal. As such, staff are proposing an alternative recommendation that council defeat development permit number 539. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. I'll just go back to council, see if you have any questions before I go to the public. Councilor Pettengill and then Councilor Race.
Yeah, thank you. A couple things. You mentioned SPIA, which I believe is an acronym. Can you clarify what that is?
Through the mayor, it is a streamside protection and enhancement area. It's an acronym for that, and that's a provincial acronym for the streamside protection and enhancement area.
Okay, thank you. And then my other question was on the step code. You mentioned, I think the building is being built to step 4. Is that a requirement or is that above our requirement at this point?
Through the mayor, at this point, it is above our requirement. The current step is step 3 until the new year, at which time it goes up to step 4.
Thank you.
Councilor Race.
Thank you. Mr. Daly, the variance on the third variance, which is to eliminate the need for the setback on the north property line, looks like in the diagrams, it's only a portion of that property line. Would we want to be more specific and say it's the westerly 20 meters or whatever the measurement might be of the north property line?
Through the mayor, that is an option that is worth looking at. It could also be highlighted on the landscape plan that is attached to the development permit, I believe. It is just required in that area to screen the parking stalls in that one section. But if it needs to be more explicitly called out, that is an option that we could go forward with.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions, Council? Councilor Herford?
Thank you. On this proposed shared parking calculation, what does the covenant cover? Like the proposed covenant on that?
Through the mayor, so in this situation, it would be covering the fact that there is parking stalls spread between two separate lots. Typically, how a shared parking arrangement would work would be that it is limiting the classes of uses. But in this case, the proposal is to share the required commercial stalls with the visitor parking stalls. Typically, what would be outlined in the shared parking arrangement would potentially be a required residential stall for one of the residential units. So it would limit the class of use on the commercial stall. In this instance, it is the shared parking calculation was used to calculate the required parking requirement for the entire site. And given the further rationale in the report that was provided that noted that the 0.25 visitor parking stall requirement in the zoning bylaws is quite high compared to other reports that have been done around Metro Vancouver. And I believe in the report, it also noted that it included a provision for an even higher requirement than what they had seen at various multifamily developments around Metro Vancouver, that it would likely be around 0.15. So the shared parking arrangement in this instance would be securing access through the lot that building A is on, and the number of parking stalls that are spread out between the two lots.
Mr. Valeniskis, do you want to add to that?
Yes, just to add that it would also require maintaining the signage on those commercial and visitor parking lots to be maintained, and as well as that system of shared parking to be in place in perpetuity.
Go ahead, Councilor Herford.
So, so that it pertains exactly to the parking spots, not to the uses of the commercial spaces or the whether existing or new. Correct? Or hoursation or?
Correct. In this instance, they're specifically to the parking spaces.
Yeah. So in the thank you, and in the report, it stated that something along the lines that given the two commercial tenants in the existing development close at 4 p.m. Was the particular part of that I want to zone in on. It said the sharing of visitor and commercial stalls is likely to be successful. Firstly, the post office is open quite a bit later than that, although the customer service isn't. So I don't know what the reduction of traffic is when there's customer service available and when people are just stopping in to get their mail. And different configurations of that restaurant have been open later into the evening. So I struggle with this one, and I think presupposing the operating hours to fit the project is what I'm feeling from this report, and it's not sitting well that way. Also, with the gravel parking, I've spent lots of time in that particular parking lot and others that are sort of unregulated. They turn into a bit of a free form. So is there a way to, I didn't see anything that really showed how they were going to propose to sort of delineate these parking spots to make sure that that it's used efficiently into its full capacity, and which I think is particularly important given that we're being asked to go to vary that capacity as well. So is there any comment on the delineation of the parking spots to ensure that what's being proposed is actually how the lot will be used?
So through the mayor, the proponent has indicated they are looking at a design solution using crushed gravel and geogrid and incorporating some form of delineation in that system to ensure that all of the required parking stalls are provided and meet the required dimensions. Obviously, they're sort of limited given that the areas that are in the SPIA cannot be paved. So you're limited to what types of materials you can use, so it needs to remain permeable. But there's design solutions that they're exploring to ensure that the parking would be looked at prior to building permit occupancy to ensure that the delineation is there. And just, I also wanted to note that there are 8 on-street parking stalls in front of the existing general store building that are proposed to remain along with the frontage improvements with this application. So that does provide, some more parking stalls for people who would be looking to attend those businesses in hours after 4 p.m.
Continue.
Thank you. In the trip generation and parking report, figure 1 shows the existing on-street parking supply, and thank you for taking me there. And in that image, it shows a car parked in the wrong direction, facing northbound on the west side of the road. And this is a common issue in this particular location. I'm wondering how the development is going to improve the parking in this particular aspect of the parking.
So through the mayor, that will be secured through the servicing agreement. The initial design obviously has shown that there will be a sidewalk and a bike lane and maintaining the 8 parking stalls, and there will be frontage improvements that will come through the servicing agreement. Given the level of uncertainty with the variance requests associated with this project and the public pushback, the proponent has not gone into in-depth design on the civil design drawings for the frontage improvements at this time. Just given the level of uncertainty with the project, but that would be taken care of at the servicing agreement process.
I could keep going if that's. I'm happy to relinquish my time. You can come back to me if you'd like. One more. Okay, I'll go.
And then I'll go to someone else. I'll come back to you.
Thank you. I'll continue on the parking bit. The site circulation and the loading dock looks particularly tight. Has that been flushed through and meets all the requirements for maneuvering the required vehicles in and out of there? That on the drawings, it just looks to me to be extremely tight. Does staff have any comment on that?
The proponent or the architect ran a truck turning radius model for that required loading bay. I can appreciate that it does look tight, but it should be sufficient to allow for a sufficient loading space.
And does it, sorry, if I can follow up to that one, does this fix the post office loading that happens often directly in front in those 8 on-street parking spots? Or does this, through this development, address that, and all the loading will happen at the rear, and thus we'll have all 8 spots available in the front?
Through the mayor, I believe that the intention is to provide all off-street loading from the rear. Obviously, it would be challenging if the spaces were open out front and a member or an employee of the post office decided to park out front to unload some materials there. There could be signage out front clarifying that it is not on-street loading and is on-street parking.
The vehicle that would be doing that is a semi-trailer.
Oh,
for reference.
Yes,
yeah.
That would be required to happen through the rear.
Okay, thank you. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Go ahead, Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mr. Ely, in your presentation, you said that how many of the parking stalls will have EV infrastructure?
So there will be 12 of the residential stalls, which meets the 30% requirement, and 2 of the shared visitor and commercial parking stalls will also be provided, which is not a requirement in the zoning bylaw.
Okay, I just want to clarify on that one. In the zoning bylaw, I just picked up on F2 of the EV parking. It says 100% of the required off-street parking stalls in any shared parking area for multi-unit residential shall be provided with EV charging infrastructure.
Through the chair, that is correct. That is the pre-wiring or conduit to facilitate that, which will be provided. The actual EV charging receptacles will be provided as the bylaw requirement for the 38% requirement.
Thank you for that clarification. That's it for now, Chair. Oh,
Thank you.
sorry, one quick
Yep.
follow-up. Just to confirm the frontage improvements, are we expecting that the sidewalk will be elevated?
Through the mayor, I believe it will be. Again, at this time, the design is very high level, and just confirming that the road right of way has the adequate width to accommodate all of this infrastructure. The design guidelines for government road have yet to be finalized, and should this development permit go through, then the detailed civil designs will come forward as part of the servicing agreement. But I believe the sidewalk will be elevated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Anderson?
Yes, old timers will remember that the Brackendale store had gas pumps for quite a long time, up to probably mid 70s, from at least the end of the 40s. So there has or is, we don't know. I've talked to locals there who don't have precise memory of how that was addressed during the building renovation during the early 70s. So my question is, it having been a fuel station, is there some possibility of soil contamination, and has there been some assessment to at least some preliminary assessment as to whether there's any prospect of soil contamination under the store building?
Through the mayor, I'm not aware if there has been any soil contamination. The proponent has provided a site profile, which is required by the Ministry of the Environment, with a development permit application that did not indicate the existence of any underground storage tank or any kind of soil contamination. Should that be discovered through the building permit process, then that would need to be addressed with the Ministry of Environment at that time. But the site profile requires that the owner answer the profile to the best of their knowledge, and they are unaware that there are any soil contamination issues with the site.
Thank you, Mr. Daly.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. In your drawing, can you just clarify, in the slide you presented, you had the green line for the height and then the red line for the height, but there was still building above the red line.
Correct. So height is taken to the midpoint of the roof, as defined in the zoning bylaw for that type of roof.
And the height was to improve the livability of the units on the top, and I'm just wondering what that means.
It is to increase the ceiling height in the units in the top floor and provide for some taller windows to allow for more light to penetrate into the units. So that was what that was, or to improve the general livability of the units.
Couldn't that be achieved with a skylight?
It could.
In terms of the buffer, the landscape buffer variance, we have 2 meters of the buffer all the way along. How high does that material grow to be a buffer?
Through you, Mayor, the intent is to build a trellis the same height as the existing fence, which I believe is 6 feet tall, and then that would allow the climbing vines to climb the height of the fence. So it would be a 6 foot tall screen in that one section of area that would have a parking stall adjacent to the neighboring property line.
No, I'm just trying to understand, like on the rest of the property line, there's a 2 meter buffer and it's planted, right?
It is only a requirement along parking stalls. So the southern property line, there's a creek and a setback. So there's already kind of more of a setback. And there's also the setback for the building requirements. So that kind of just naturally allows for landscaping to be planted there. There is not a setback requirement from the adjacent property line for the actual parking stall itself. So in this instance, it's the variance request is to allow this parking stall to go up to the property line and then replace the screening that would be in place with the climbing vine. Did that answer your question?
Okay, maybe. I'm with you now. So it's not, that 2 meter buffer is only required where there's parking.
Correct.
Okay, and then if we planted that, let's say that we didn't vary this and that buffer was there, how high would the plantings grow?
I
feel like
believe,
When
sorry.
we did this in other developments, how high do the plantings need to grow?
If you'll allow me to reference the zoning bylaw, I don't have that right off the tip of my tongue, but
Okay.
they have to be at least 0.9 meters in height at the time of planting. So they have to be at least that tall, and then there's no limit on how tall they can grow. They just have to be at least 0.9 meters in height when they're planted.
All right. So it wouldn't necessarily grow to the height of the fence if it was there.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay, my final question is it's curious to me that the alternative recommendation from staff is to defeat the motion. Usually it's to return it to staff. But also in your presentation, you mentioned something that the owner of the property is waiting to see the outcome of this and may proceed with their duplex. Is that what I heard?
That is correct. So the previous owners submitted a development permit application to construct a duplex at the rear of the property. Under this development permit that you are considering this evening, that would be secured through an environmental covenant and enhanced. It would not be developed. The development permit to allow that duplex has not yet expired. So if this development permit isn't approved, there's no securing that environmental area would not be developed, because it can be under Development Permit Area 1 guidelines and provincial riparian guidelines. And then if you'd like me to speak to the motion, as you noted, typically it's not uncommon for staff to have an alternative recommendation that suggests that the permit be referred back to staff for further review. However, in discussions with the developer, this project could not accommodate any major changes to the project. So if council were seeking major revisions to this project, it would be unlikely that it would be able to be brought forward again for consideration another time. So staff were requesting that it be defeated so the applicant could go back and work on a very different or revised proposal.
Okay. Mr. Villaniscus, I saw your hand.
Yeah, so just want to echo what Brian said, that, there's probably room here to make small adjustments. We made sure that, we've asked the proponent to put their best foot forward, in a sense, if they want to proceed with this arrangement for this many rental units. So if there are major changes, then, it would be probably easier for staff to also process this as just a new application.
Fair. But that recommendation doesn't necessarily mean it turns into a duplex. That if we defeat it, it could come back as another higher density project, just not this one.
That's correct. Yeah, we have no idea. We haven't had any discussions with the applicant what the alternative looks like for them.
Yeah. Okay. I'll go back to Councillor Stoner, and Councillor Herford. Do you have more questions? Okay, and then Councillor Pettengill.
Thank you. Through the chair, Mayor, your question prompted something. I'm just curious when the C1 zoning came into effect and how there's a development permit for a duplex on the site if it's C1 zoned.
Through the mayor, that property at the back, addressed 41675 Government Road, is zoned RS2. So this development encompasses has the same owner for 4 parcels. The parcels fronting Government Road are zoned C1. The parcels behind to the west are zoned RS2. They are not, under this proposal, they are not proposing to be developed. They're environmentally sensitive areas that would be secured through an environmental covenant.
Thank you. Councillor Herford?
Thank you. We're being asked to consider a height variance, and as I said about doing that, I came across figure 5 in our report, which is the rendering of the development looking west from Wayne Place. I don't know if that's something you could put up for us? So at all, it's not crucial.
I believe I have
visual
it.
would be great.
Sorry, one moment.
That's okay. Sorry to catch you with a. I'm glad that we might be able to put it up, but it would really prove my point if it could be.
I believe this is the rendering you're referencing.
There's another one where there's children playing in the street, but anyways, this is just looking west from Wayne Place. This isn't a perspective that I believe exists, and it's missing the context of the neighborhood surroundings, and also it seems quite distorted to the height of the general store to the proposed building behind it, and I noticed in other images in this proposal, there's been some trees that look to be way higher than they are in what I consider reality. And this one's great, upper left of our screen there, obscuring the building to quite a high extent. So I'm curious to what level, just in general, staff considers the perspectives presented as rationale. Because when we actually look at what was page 34 in our package, we see a far more realistic rendering that actually has that rear building towering over the existing building, which I believe is the perspective of what is more realistic perspective. So how does staff or can you comment on sort of those perspectives as presented and what our policy is around accepting these versions of reality versus some of our more realistic renderings that are in the package as well?
Through the mayor, obviously the architects do the best job that they can trying to work on these renderings. Obviously, the one you mentioned from Wayne Place does not show, it appears to not show the building as high as one might assume it would appear from there. But that might just be the location that they were doing the rendering from, where the foreground was, or it was foreshortened because the building was in front. The trees surrounding the development are quite tall, but obviously it is a delicate balance with trying to have extremely accurate renderings. Staff thought that these did an adequate job of illustrating the form and character of the development, while recognizing that it is challenging to always show the massing of the building associated with an existing building on site.
Yeah, and one of the issues with that first image from Wayne Place is that it's not in a meadow. There's buildings there, other points of reference and context to the neighborhood. And I think context to the neighborhood is something that's a challenge with this project. And I don't think that an image better represents that than Figure 5 in their lack of context to the neighborhood. One more, I'll go one more, I suppose. With the proposed waste land solution, is it common to have one waste room for 3 buildings?
Through the mayor, we are currently developing our waste stream guidelines, so there is nothing that would preclude that from happening currently. It is not uncommon for this type of development where the buildings are situated close together and they're limited in the area that they can locate the waste stream given the substantial SPIA on site. The opportunity is limited for the locations where they could put that waste room.
I just note that the waste facility is in close proximity to all 3 buildings, but the actual exit from the apartments in the existing building are to the very northeast corner of the property, making it a long trek around to get to the appropriate spot. So I don't know that proximity to the building necessarily sets it right for me. Sorry, I said one more, but this will be my last one, I think, for now. But there's lots of mentioning about stormwater, and the ADP notes really go into, was the quote, consider robust rainwater management strategy. And There's other talking about the pooling in the existing parking lot. And I think they both kind of miss the point of that specific site. It's not so much the rainwater management as it's spring water. There's springs coming out the bottom of, it's basically the bottom of the toe of the Chikai fan there. And there's pumps operating in the basement of the existing building, pumping water out daily. And that's, I think 24 hours a day. So that puddle and that one, if you go visit the site, that one pothole that you go through on your way in is a spring. And I didn't see anything addressing the spring water and the management of that, because that is in my opinion, the drainage issue of that facility, having spent many years in that exact parking lot. Was there any so with that, the ground, like I suppose it's groundwater to storm water, is there any consideration for managing that so we don't end up with something sinking?
Through the mayor, a stormwater management plan is required as part of the building permit application process, and the riparian report did include recommendations to include oil water separators in the parking lot to improve the water quality of any runoff from the proposed parking area into any of the adjacent riparian areas. So this would be something that would be addressed following the approval of the development permit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pettengill, and then I've got Councillor Ray.
Yeah, thank you. There is a shading study or some diagrams, and we've got some letters about that. What are the requirements, or at least guidelines, around shading? I didn't see anything specific in the DPA guidelines, although maybe I missed it.
Through the mayor, that's typically not a requirement for a development permit unless it is in the downtown area. Our development permit guidelines do not speak to that, and it is not identified in the development approval information areas at this time. I believe there is a requirement for buildings downtown, but for a development of this size, it is not a requirement. It was requested by the applicant to provide one to help show what the shading might look like, and it was provided.
Okay, thank you. If I can continue. And I understand this is about the variances, but looking through the guidelines, you know, if we have a different perspective in terms of whether or not it's meeting the DPA guidelines, is that when we would take the alternative recommendation? And that's, or that sort of, the guideline analysis is strictly a staff prerogative?
I might allow my director to answer this one.
Go ahead, Mr.
No.
Valanister.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor, staff are here to advise council and recommend a certain course of action, but it is certainly council's ability to also interpret the guidelines and make a decision based on the interpretation and also a recommendation from staff.
Okay, thank you. And the final thing, just for clarity, you know, without the variances, if I understand, the developer could choose to move ahead with essentially the same structures, just a slightly lower height and larger units, thereby requiring fewer parking spaces, but the building form and massing would be compliant with our existing zoning. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, that may be an option, though I'm having discussions with the developer. They've indicated that this was the number of units that were required to make the development viable, especially considering that they're providing market rental housing and moderate income rental housing and preserving the existing general store. It may be possible for them to move forward with a different proposal at a lower height and not preserve the existing general store and not require variances. I've not had in-depth discussions about what that revised proposal would look like, but after having extensive discussions, the number of units required or what's proposed to make the rental housing and moderate income rental housing viable, and given that the footprint on the lot, the development footprint on the lot is constrained, the height variance is a requirement.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you. concerned about this parking area that might not be paved, and I take it that this is the, for lack of a better term, I'll call it the west parking lot that's at the back of the lot that's in the SPIA. And the suggestion is that it will be filled with, I think, some kind of a gravel. There was a word for it in the report that I forget, but I take it that's some kind of a crush that would allow water impermeability. Is that correct? Is that the intent?
Through the mayor, that the intent is to use that with a geogrid type of material, sort of a plastic material that would hold the crush and still allow it to be permeable, while still maintaining the function of allowing it to be permeable and not constituting development within the SPIA. The parking use is grandparented within that area because it is existing. So the design intent is to use some form of geogrid that would hold that gravel and ensure that it is not, requiring extensive ongoing maintenance, and to delineate the parking stalls.
Well, yeah, I'm not familiar with geogrids, but I've had these crush parking lots before, actually, in a home I had once. And the thing that made it hold together was the clay content, which once it sets up becomes almost impermeable, at least to a layperson. And so I was sort of visioning something like that, but if it was any softer or more permeable, it would cut up very quickly. And when you get the firmness that this stuff comes to eventually, hardly seems impermeable. I think the water would almost just run off a pool in it. And I'm wondering if that's correct, and also if anything like pavers or something like that have been contemplated as a possible surface for this area that might allow water to go through them.
So through the mayor, essentially this geogrid is a way to describe it would be almost like a paver. It would provide it's kind of a plastic grid that holds the gravel in place and essentially acts as a paver, but does not constitute a paver. Again, it's very limited in what materials can be used within this area, and ensuring that it doesn't constitute a form of new development, which would then not allow for the use to continue there. So this staff are confident that there is a design solution that with this geogrid that will maintain a permeable surface that is durable and not requiring ongoing maintenance and maintains permeability. There can be issues with permeable pavers as well, where they also get clogged up over time and then also do not result in a permeable surface as well. So this geogrid sounds like it is a competent design solution that can be used.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions before I go to the public? Councillor Herford and then Councillor Stoner. Councillor Herford?
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I had to get to the right the right spot. Under the DPA guidelines of building form massing, it said that this is about stepping back the upper floors, and the comment was upper story setbacks are not used as the building massing is quite small. And just that statement just doesn't sit with me on the rest of this as I look at this proposal, and the buildings are viewed not just statically from the front, but as you move through the neighborhood, we're going to see all the sides of this. And I don't think that looking at this, I can say that the building massing is quite small. So I would argue that that particular part of the guideline simply isn't met with this proposal. Does staff would like to expand on the isn't or is quite small comment?
So through the mayor, the footprint of the building is limited, and the upper stories, the design intent was to use gabled forms to attempt to visually reduce the massing. Anytime upper stories are set back, it can affect the performance, the energy efficiency performance of the building. So unfortunately, while not always as visually appealing, typically if you can envision the more of a boxy type structure with less steps, the easier it is to achieve a more energy efficient building. So staff felt that the architect proposed a reasonable gabled form and dormer to attempt to reduce the massing, but it is certainly a valid point if you do not agree with that comment.
Well, I think some comments in that particular area around the energy efficiency, and maybe that goes to our DPA guidelines, but as it stands, I don't feel it hits that threshold for me. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm just curious if staff know the height of the existing general store building.
Through the chair, I don't know exactly, but I believe it is around 3 stories. So likely 10.68 meters, roughly what the allowable height in the zone is.
Thank you.
Mr. Daly, just going back to parking, we have people dropping by to pick up their mail, then we have another use where people will be there for a longer time. So are there short-term parking stalls contemplated either on the street or in the shared area at certain hours?
They have not been contemplated in the shared areas, but they certainly could be accommodated along the frontage in front of the building. When those frontage improvements go in, signage requiring shorter term parking in that location can be included.
And what about accessible parking?
The accessible parking is provided adjacent to Building A, or across from Building A, I believe, across from the lift. And then there is another accessible stall provided behind the existing general store adjacent to Building B, also near the wheelchair lift that would provide access to that ground floor commercial space.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any more hands. Probably a good time to go to the public and hear any comments on the variances from them. So just a reminder to the public again that it is *3 if you're on your phone, and if you're on WebEx to go to the participant panel and just click on the little hand icon that's there.
So we're going to start off by going to the proponent. His name is Talib Jawani, and he is on WebEx. Talib, if you could give us your name and your address, and you have up to 5 minutes to address council. And when I unmute you, you'll have your chance to speak.
Hello, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I don't know if I can get my video on here.
Oh, sorry, no, we don't have you set as a panelist. You're just audio.
No worries. Thanks for taking the time to review the project. I'm Talib Jawani, and my wife Julie is here as well. We are the property owners. I can give you guys some brief background about this property for us. We bought it about 2.5 years ago when it first came on the market. So we were intrigued by the fact that it was an established hub and the history of the general store and the post office dating back to 1916 as well. So keeping the existing general store, if you look at it in isolation or with a shorter term perspective, doesn't make a lot of sense given the rest of the constraints on the property. But for us, it was a decision that was based on a longer term outlook. We've spent about 1.5 years in the planning process. So what you're seeing now is not the first iteration. There's been a lot of careful thought and back and forth on this. It's a balancing act between setbacks, bylaws, zoning, and staying true to the existing use. So our idea was to take the existing use and simply expand on it, taking into account the flood rules and building code of today. I wanted to quickly address some of the constraints we faced that Brian's already highlighted. I think the biggest constraint is self-created by deciding to keep the general store building. And the next one is really the flood control level and debris field. Flood control level is 3 meters and the debris field is 1.5 meters. So essentially that causes the first floor of the residential to be raised above that level. And the majority of the structure, really, when you look at it, is a 3-story building that's raised on stilts. To make this project mixed use, we need the height variance to make the commercial portion work just beyond the livability of the upper floors. It's also to make the commercial portion work. And the second constraint's obviously the creek setback, where the duplex that was approved previously would go. This results in mainly the parking variance. So basically the height variance is a result of the flood and debris field, and the parking variance is a result of some of the creek setbacks. And they're both really impacted by keeping the general store building. I wanted to address a bit of the public feedback. So through the 1.5 year of planning phase, we heard feedback from multiple sources. I won't speak too much about the architecture, but we have made numerous modifications along the way. I think splitting the density up into 3 structures rather than having one large structure really does create less site coverage, and it allows more light and space than a single large wide building. So having a slightly taller building, but not as wide, and having half of the new density set so far back from the street is a really big positive. Given that this density is allowed in one single structure in the existing zoning, I think breaking it up the way the team has done really brings the scale and massing down. I've also heard a fair bit of feedback on parking. I think viewed in the context of the existing site, I understand some of the feedback. But this proposal adds a significant amount of new spots that aren't there now, where the old shed is, and also in an area that's fenced off behind the general store. So having spots clearly identified, which we intend to do, will make a big difference to efficiency. As a long-term owner, it isn't our goal to create a parking problem. That's not really in our interest either. So we want to keep our tenants and we want to keep them happy. So I hope council can look at this in a pragmatic way, take a long-term view of the land use and support it. It's essentially expanding on a concept of what's already been in place for a century. Benefits like adding rental stock, keeping existing and creating new commercial spaces for local businesses, providing continued and improved access to the Cottonwood Park, and giving the environmental covenants on the riparian areas, as well as the heritage covenant to protect the general store building, are all really positive outcomes. I think in this light, the variances being asked for are relatively minor, and they're reasonable when viewed in a broader context of what we hope to achieve. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you. I'm just going to our moderator.
Okay, so we're going to go to a Brennan Park caller. We have Tony Addis at Brennan Park. Can you please state your name and address for the record, Tony? And you have up to 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Tony Addis. I live at 41728 Government Road, which is kitty corner from the Brackendale store, 2 up and on the opposite side. I've lived in the same spot for 40 years. I've seen that area grow and grow and grow. And the biggest problem in the last 5 years is the traffic and parking. The parking situation is out of hand. We have more than just one vehicle parked northwards. I've almost had 3 head-on collisions when I pull out of my driveway for people pulling U-turns and coming out. And to correct you guys on it, thank you, Armin, for bringing a lot of it up. But to correct you guys on it, there's 8 spots in front, which is 3 of them belong to the Halversons' lot. And that is up for sale right now. So you're going to see that 8 is going to go down to 5. The other thing is there's a 5-corner entranceway there. You got Dryden Creek, Wayne's Place, north-south of Government Road, and then this new subdivision or this new development. Our lot, everybody parks wherever they park. Up from the street, across the street in the bike lanes, our driveway, Halverson's driveway. You might as well put a circle drive in front of my house because they use my driveway and the other driveway to stop, go to the store, to do U-turns, which is at least 20 times a day. I don't think that development with that parking situation, it sounds good and everything like that for the parking to be like that, but it's not going to work. I've seen semis try to go into the back there and come out, but it does not work. They hold up traffic anytime they try to go in there. At one time, it was at least 5 to 10 minutes when a semi got stuck in there to try to turn around. There's no way they can unload. Mail comes at 5 o'clock in the morning and at night. I know, I can hear them. So, and they park out in the street facing north. There's nobody there at the front, and if they stop doing that, you're going to find no mail delivery happening there because it's a semi truck that goes all the way up to Pemberton. So all I can see is that it's going to be a major thing. There's schools, 2 schools up that road, by the way, people. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon, when they come out, it's a rampage down both sides of the street. There's been traffic hassles like you wouldn't believe. And people are parked across the street from me, and there's no parking signs there. So do you think people are going to believe or listen to any parking signs that you're going to put up front? It's not going to happen. People are in a hurry now. They seem to be more and more and more, and it's just not going to work with the parking situations. So thank you, Armin, for bringing some of that up. That is happening there, and it's just getting worse. So that's all I have to say about that part. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Addis.
Okay, we're going to go to a WebEx caller next. We have Ian McDonald on the line. Ian, you are next speaker. Please state your name and address for the record. You have 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Ian McDonald. I'm the architect for this project. I have a few items to add to this discussion for your consideration. Some of them are repeats, but I hope you'll bear with me. First, I'll start by observing what everybody knows, and that's based on some of the online comments I've seen, there's some confusion about it. The project isn't a rezoning. The property is already zoned for the use and density that we're proposing, and this is described well in the community plan as a hub or a community node. So I think in a broad sense, we really feel that the project is fulfilling this objective that that Squamish has. So first, I'd like to reiterate that the challenges of the various site constraints placed on the project, because they really are the drivers to the variance requests. First, the flood and debris flow hazards, which require the buildings to be significantly elevated, and together with the creek setbacks, those limit not just where we can locate buildings, but also the available parking, which is as much discussed, and I'm sensitive to that issue and agree with much of what Talib has said. But I'll add that a crucial point here is that Talib and his wife Julie have chosen to retain the existing building, and that really is the kind of linchpin in a lot of the site organization strategies that we've undertaken. It's that last constraint that's really at the core of what we're talking about here today, both the height and the available parking. It would be comparatively easier in an alternative scenario to demolish the existing building and build, as Talib alluded to, a larger kind of block building. But I don't think that's in anybody's interest, really, and it's certainly not what Talib and Julie have been interested in. The existing building has kind of a community heritage component, and I think that really speaks to the longevity of the long-term residents and their value of the community. So I think in sum, we're really passionate about this project, and notwithstanding some of the moderate comments that have been made, really feel that it would add significantly to the community and build on the ambitions that Squamish already has for this important kind of community asset and public node. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Okay, so we're going to another WebEx caller. We have Della Halverson on the line. Hello, Della, you're our next speaker. Please state your name and address for the record. You have up to 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead. Hi, Della, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
You bet.
Okay. Hi, my name is Della Halverson. My address is 41773 Government Road. Thank you for the opportunity to address council on this project. Last spring, my neighbors and I crafted a letter that outlined our concerns with the proposal at the time. I'm proud to say that our letter was supported by over 430 of our fellow Brackendale residents, former residents, and family and friends around the globe. However, 90% of the respondents were residents of Brackendale. The comments that were included in our package showed how passionate our community is concerning livability, safety, and environment. I think our issues echo some of the ones that were brought up a few weeks ago at the Eagle Run project in terms of unrealistic parking. I was happy to hear Councillor Herford point out tonight what happens if the current restaurant changes to a different format and is open later for dinner service. The parking study doesn't seem to reflect the fact that there can be 10 to 15, sometimes 20 or more cars in that parking lot visiting the cafe, and all those spots would be lost to the new buildings with the residential parking. I know that they're talking about combined commercial and visitor parking. I still don't see it being enough. Also, thank you, Councillor Herford, for pointing out about the large mail truck. I agree. I don't think a semi will be able to get in the back. I saw a recent letter posted to tonight's agenda about some fellow Brackendale residents in support of the current proposal, and that's awesome. However, I was saddened to hear that they thought we were simply against density and that all we wanted was to, quote, stop the development. I had hoped that our letter was clear that my neighbors and I had concerns regarding the project, and that our letter pointed out that if the project were kept within the zoning for height, the concerns regarding the parking would be eased. I hope that council has not come to the conclusion that we're simply trying to stop it. I hope that council sees the dedication of our community and can take our concerns as a way of improving the project. In fact, I wondered if our submission helped guide some of the offers that the developer has made regarding the new covenants. I was encouraged to see that the current proposal has improvements that were reflected in some of the comments in our petition. I see it now includes a nod to affordable housing, a nod toward recognizing historical character, and especially important, a statutory right-of-way for public access to Cottonwood Park from government. However, I'm still not sure that the depth of the environmental concerns are being addressed adequately in the new covenants. I'm so proud of our community's response to come together to help guide this new addition to Brackendale. I urge council to deny the variances, which would allow the project more time to consider the concerns that were brought forward by the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Halverson. Don't have any more callers or speakers at Brennan Park or folks on WebEx. So I will go back to council to see if you have any more clarifying questions. Go ahead, Councillor Pettengill.
Thank you. There was a comment about the number of available street spots in front of this location. And I just wonder if staff can clarify whether or not there is actually 8 available. When I look at the drawings, it looks to me like there's 6, but I don't know if those are to scale or if that's just what that is. And there was, a mention of a different or better bus stop. And so between a crosswalk and a bus stop, not clear how many full-size spots, especially if there's some accessible spots out in front, how many spots we're actually talking about.
Through the mayor, on the site plan and frontage improvement drawing that I am looking at, it appears that there is sufficient room to accommodate, I believe, 8 stalls in front of the existing general store, while still allowing for a sidewalk and bike lane on the existing frontage. So the drawing that granted it is small, I'm counting 8 spots here, and it looks like there is sufficient space to accommodate that. And the architect based that design off of our parking stall dimensions.
Okay, thank you. Somewhat related, I gather then that some of the accessible spots in the back or for the residential units would be on gravel. Is that correct? And is that consistent with current guidelines for accessible?
Councillor Pettengill, you just cut out there for a second, so can you start again?
Yeah, thank you. Just a further question about accessible spots. I take it ones around the back of the building for the residential units would be on gravel. And I'm wondering if that is consistent with current guidelines around accessible spots or what the rules are around that sort of thing.
Through the mayor, the required accessible parking stalls are not being proposed on any of the gravel parking areas. Where they are located is proposed on asphalt.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We've got another caller on WebEx, so I'll go to our moderator.
Okay, hi Della, we're going to allow you to speak again. So you can state your name and address again for the record. You have up to 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead.
Ms. Halverson, I gave you a little bit of leeway the first time, but please speak to the variances.
Okay, yes, this is speaking to the variances. Well, it's all kind of connected. So hi again, my name is Della Halverson, 41773 Government Road. I would like to talk about the habitat. It's all connected in the parking variances. It's just all connected. It was mentioned earlier that a permeable material would be used. However, permeable still means that contaminants can get through. I received an additional comment on environmental concerns from a neighbor that he said I could share. His letter said, "One concern that hasn't been discussed in great length from what I can tell is that this development site abuts against the headwaters of Brackendale Creek, a creek that has had sustainable chum salmon run that in all likelihood goes back hundreds to thousands of years. In the Cottonwood Park area of Brackendale Creek, at least 25 spawning chum have been counted on more than one occasion during the spawning season. In fact, we're likely to see chum return to the headwaters and spawn over the next few days with the rain. And while some precautions that have been developed to mitigate against some of the environmental concerns, there's still worries that impacts of stormwater pollution, the use of road salt and on the road and parking area, oil and gasoline leaks or spills from vehicles, and increased human encroachment on the riparian area all collectively will have negative impacts on the creek given the size of this development. And because this area is the headwater of the creek, any detrimental material or substance that gets into the creek will flow downstream and possibly impair other segments of the creek. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Council, any other questions? Councilor Pettengill.
Just with respect to the DPA guidelines and the some of the form and character piece, I know there was mention that because this was a high step code, that sort of implies, or it's easier to do with a blockier building. But does it prevent, or is there any reason why you can't do, even if it's more decorative, provide more visual interest, or sort of, I don't know, gables or something sticking out, or false balconies, or even real balconies? Does that hinder step code in any way?
Through the mayor, obviously the step code, all of the material selection would likely have implications on the insulation values of the building. I'm not sure that if there is additional articulation, if that would impact it. I see that Jonas has put his hand up.
Yeah, but also, Councilor Pettengill, our staff are not building energy experts, and so I'm not sure we should ask them to speculate. There's lots of ways to achieve the energy step code. It's flexible so that builders can choose the way to do that. If your question is about the articulation of the building, and then ask a question about that, but I don't think it's up to our staff to speculate on. Anyway, I'll let Mr. Valniskas answer the question, but, you know, stick to the DPA guidelines rather than asking staff to speculate about the energy step code would be preferred. Do you want to ask your question in a slightly different way?
Well, I guess the step code was given as a justification, as I understood the comments, for the reason why the guidelines are the comments in the guidelines. So I'm trying to reconcile that. Like, is that truly because of step code, it can only be done this way, or are there other options?
There you go. Mr. Valniskas?
Yes, thank you. So we do know that with step code, it does impact the building, the livable spaces in the building. Yes, you can probably dress up a building on the outside without having any penetrations through the walls. But then again, that eats into floor area ratios and setbacks. So the higher you go in the step code, the less penetrations you want to have through the building for even things like balconies, although there are solutions to these things, but it gets more and more expensive. So, you know, it's dependent on the size of the project. This is a smaller size project, relatively speaking, for Squamish. And because of the, you know, a suite of benefits that the development is proposing, we have to balance that against the guidelines.
Yep. Thank you.
Councillor Herford, did I see your hand?
No, Councillor Pettingill got it with the rephrasing where I was going. Thank you.
Thank you. I would, yeah, no, I'm not going to ask that question. Do we have any more callers on WebEx?
Yes, we have one more caller. We are going to go to Ian McDonald again. Ian, if you could please state your name and address for the record. You have up to 5 minutes to address council, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I'll just speak quickly to the step code item that was raised. As my structural engineer instructor in schools used to say, you can solve any problem with headroom and money. So with respect to changes in roof forms and setbacks specifically, basically any turn in a building envelope is costly in terms of energy consumption. It represents what's considered a geometric thermal break. The insulation performs less effectively at that juncture, and items like parapets are notoriously challenging. While easy to execute with older methods of building construction, it's simply not, increasingly not an option for more complex, high-performing thermal building envelopes. This would apply also to penetrations generally. We'll be motivated moving this project ahead to minimize the number of penetrations through the building envelope, primarily because each one represents a bridge of from the outside to the inside, or the reverse as a conduit for heat. To the comments that they are addressable technically, that is true. There are a number of ways to skin that cat, but I would say that we are looking to achieve a kind of cost-effective solution, understanding that 20% of the units are being rented at below market rates, and that does have a concern for the developer. And we are showing Juliet balconies on the proposal. So, I mean, it is not that the project is bereft of access to the outdoors from the individual suites. Thank you.
Staff, can I just ask what the common space requirements are or in this development, and where they're being met, or if it's just being met in that one area to the north?
So through you, Mayor, this project is not large enough to trigger a shared open space requirement. What is being provided is not required by the zoning bylaw. It is being just provided.
Okay, thanks. We're going back to...
We have a WebEx caller, so we have Della H. You're our next speaker. Please state your name and address for the record once again. You have up to 5 minutes to address council. Please go ahead.
Stella, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, it's Della again. Okay, one final little spiel here. And I just did want to say thank you to Talib and Julie for listening in as well. It was nice to hear from you. One thing that I would like to discuss is the property on the northern side is most affected by the view and shadowing. As Councillor Herford pointed to earlier, the DPA guideline table suggests that a project should consider form and character of nearby buildings, and that the siting, massing, and heights of multi-story buildings should minimize the view and solar impact on adjacent developments. It is clear from the shadow studies submitted that there are, in fact, quite significant solar impacts on the neighboring property. This is a major consideration when looking at the variance request increase to the maximum height. Currently, there's our family garden plot that has been lovingly cultivated for around 50 years. And I'm proud to say that our beans and spaghetti squash did pretty good this year. The garden would be hugely impacted by the shadow of Building B. However, down the road, this property could be developed and another home built there. We ask that you consider the context of a community not only includes building style, but also the scale of it. In conclusion, I feel that the character of our neighborhood has not quite adequately been considered, and urge that the variance to height not go forward, bringing the project back into an appropriate scale for the neighborhood. And this would help address one of the other major concerns that the community has. Parking issues would be eased as the number of units would be reduced to more appropriate for the circumstances of the property. I feel that when the thoughts and the concerns of the neighbors are truly considered, we will be able to embrace a redevelopment project at the Brackendale store, one that suits the community and, more importantly, the sensitive habitat surrounding it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. I'm not seeing any more hands from council. The moderator does not have anyone on the speakers list. So.
Oh, the proponent would like to speak one more time.
We're going to go back to the proponent.
Okay, so we have Talib Jawani again. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, but if you could state your name and address for the record. You have up to 5 minutes to address council, and your time starts now.
Hi, sorry, it's Talib and Julie Jawani again. I did just want to say that I think that the councillors understand, and I do think the general public understands, that it's not as simple as with rental projects in particular, and especially in Squamish, to just delete units. We've obviously considered looking at that kind of thing in the process. It's not that we were attempting to maximize the number of units, but I think people can appreciate that when working backwards on these projects, you have to see what sorts of financing are available. And given that this is in Squamish, some of the rates that these kinds of things are available at are very high. And so most of the programs that allow for rental housing, and in particular moderate income rental housing, are federally funded. And we've looked at this project with planning, we've gone back, we've looked at the models, we've tried our best in all those respects, but this is really what is feasible that we presented, and we can say that in all honesty. So I do appreciate the public comments. I do think people and council need to understand that to make projects like this work, and to create this kind of a community hub, and to create this type of rental stock, this is simply the type of variances that we're asking just to make this work. If we had more space on the lot, then certainly we could have lowered the building, but it's not the case. But the density that we're proposing is actually lower than the allowable density in the existing zoning. So thanks again for your time.
Thank you. All right. There's no more hands on the moderator. There is a hand in front of me, Councillor Pango.
Yeah, I think a process question. If we were to, just trying to understand, if we were to pursue the alternative recommendation, we're sort of killing this in its current form. And I know the proponent has said if we didn't want to accept what's before us, that is the option we should take. But if we were to just refer it back to staff, does that leave the door open so it might come back with slight changes or significantly changed, or, you know, that, like, do we have more options if we refer it back as opposed to just straight out rejecting this?
Mr. Daly or Mr. Valniscus, who would like to address that one? Mr. Valniscus.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Council has the three options: either approve the development permit with variances, refer it back to staff, or deny the variances and therefore the development permit. Staff recommended that if council is not able to approve the development permit with variances, that if it gets sent back, that we can, you know, we're pretty confident we push this development to where it can go, and we could probably go back and do minor amendments and work with the applicant on that. I think it's going to be more challenging to do bigger amendments without changing the application completely. I think in which case it'd probably be more appropriate to deny the variances and for the applicant to evaluate whether they want to reapply, and we can go through the process from the beginning.
Does that address your question, Councillor Pengill?
I think so. Thank you.
Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I just want to circle back and make sure I'm fully clear on the parking variance. So I'm looking at the summary that's provided in council's package, and it's saying that the proposed number of spaces is 49, the required number of spaces is 57, and they're proposing that 8 of the stalls are shared. Is that the correct numbers?
That is correct.
And then it also says that there are it requires 3 stalls that are accessible, and those are all on paved surface.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any questions. No more from the public. So, Council, there is a motion recommended by staff to move this with the variances. The alternative recommendation preferred, if we're going the alternative route, is to defeat. Also happy to take a 5-minute recess if that would be helpful to folks. Councillor Stoner, I saw your hand.
I'll take a 5-minute recess. Is that still on offer?
Absolutely. It is currently 7:38. We'll come back at 7:45. Okay, we are back in our special business meeting. Hopefully everyone enjoyed the break. Just making sure Councillor French is with us. It looks like he's having a network issue here. Can you hear us, Councillor French? You didn't have a text from him? Hold on, folks. Thanks for your patience. It's just at this point, it's important to me that we have all councillors accounted for. Oh, I think we got him. Councillor French, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I'm having
Yeah, we can tell you're having network problems. Do you want the opportunity to call in just on your phone at this point?
Yes.
Was that a yes?
Yeah.
I think so. Okay. So folks, we're just going to hang on so that Councillor French can reconnect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just doing that now. How many people checked the election results while we were on recess? Yeah, there you go. I was like, if no one puts their hand up, you're all lying, because I did.
I was afraid to check, but I don't see anyone crying at the moment, so hopefully that's a positive thing, but I don't want to know.
Yeah, you don't want to know. Too early to call, Councillor Pettengill. I will just check with council to see if you have any questions while we're waiting for Councillor French. Okay.
Chair,
Yes.
I'll ask a question to fill the silence.
Great, thank you.
Just going back to the usable open space on the north end, staff in their presentation spoke a little bit about accessibility to that site, but I wasn't entirely clear how somebody in a wheelchair would access it because it's stairs down from building B, and it looks like there's stairs on the side from government. So how would somebody in a wheelchair access that space?
Through the mayor, the intention is to provide a gate from the sidewalk on Government Road and allow an access path into that lower area of open space. The shared outdoor dining, the elevated shared outdoor dining area is accessible by a wheelchair lift adjacent to the handicap parking stalls.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner. Can the corporate officer please text Councillor French the phone number? His internet connection is so bad he can't get in to see it.
You know, actually, it is just my connection is way better. It's just weird. I went into a dead zone for the last couple minutes. I think it's stable enough that I should be able to just.
No. I am going to get the corporate officer to send you the phone number, Councillor French, and then you are cutting out a bit, so I just don't want you to miss the conversation. So, so we'll proceed. Okay, Council, I'll just check with our moderator. We don't have any hands. Okay, I don't see any hands from Council. So, Councillor Stoner.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Is there a seconder? I will second that for conversation. Want to speak to that, Councillor Stoner?
Yeah, I will speak to it. I am moving the recommendation looking at the variances that are proposed. And I do think that given the constraints of the site, they are reasonable based on what the developer is trying to achieve, namely retaining the existing general store building, achieving step 4 for these buildings, as well as making them market and some of them below market rental in perpetuity. I think those are all things that we're trying to achieve in all parts of our community. And this is an opportunity to start to advance that in Brackendale. I hear the concerns around the height variance. However, I look at the total height variance. This is a reality with the new flood construction level. And although it is slightly higher than normal, I do think that it will add livability space to a number of the units in there. And once you are kind of at that height already, I don't think that the additional height variance is actually that substantial. Looking at the parking variances, I do think that to some degree, the shared units will be able, or the shared parking units will be able to be feasible. And I also think that given that this is a neighborhood node, that we will be trying to encourage people walking, biking. It will allow for improved frontage, sidewalks, which don't currently exist. And I was pleased to hear that there'll be additional end of trip facilities for those on bikes. And I think that's what we want to start to encourage is folks going to check their mail by foot and by bike and not necessarily by car. So when I look at this overall in the broader context, I think that this project starts to achieve some of the things, especially that we have set out in our strategic plan as council, as well as some of the core components of our OCP.
Thank you, Councillor Stoner. Any other comments from council? Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, I was unsure how to proceed with this one, and I thought the alternate recommendation of just an outright rejection was too severe. I mean, for me, I do think it's important to think about parking, start thinking towards the future that we want to have, which is one where we are facilitating businesses that don't require large amounts of parking in residential dwelling where that is not the expectation. And I think a lot of our conversation in this has been based on the assumption of the same sorts of businesses that are very car dependent. And there are other sorts of businesses, and I think that's what we want to facilitate. So I am more comfortable with the parking variances. I think where I have some hesitation, or the most hesitation for me, is with some of the DPA guidelines. I don't think we've hit them all. And that's where I feel like a referral back to staff might have been a way to mitigate some of those. I think there's opportunity just visually to tie in these buildings without major structural changes to the general store and make them fit a little bit better. I'm also cognizant I'm not an architect, and so I want to be careful about going too far down that road. So all that to say is I'm undecided of where I am on this motion. I just wanted to share what I'm struggling with, or the concerns that I have. I really appreciate actually a lot of the things the developer has done with this space in terms of it's a rental development. There's affordable rental, a high step code, green energy. I think there's, and the protection of the environmental area. I think there's a lot of things to really like about this proposal. And so this is a tough one for me right now. And I'll pause for there. Thank you.
Councilor Race and then Anderson.
Thank you. With the variances, I don't have a problem with the variance for the screening of the parking. I think that's reasonable given some of the site constraints. I think it could be clarified as to what length along the north side might be subject to the variance. But I don't have a problem with that. I don't really have a problem with the parking variance. It's close. In other projects, we have varied slightly because of various site constraints, and I think we do have to recognize there are some site constraints here. And for me, it's close enough in the sense that when you add in the on-street parking, we get almost to the same number. So I'm satisfied with that and would allow that variance. The height variance is a bit more of a concern for me, partly because it sounds like it's for lofted ceilings and just added height to the ceilings of those units on the top floor. We could probably drive higher rents and so forth, but I think, you know, the neighborhood isn't that high, and it's not likely, it's not like a variance in the downtown area where you're surrounded by taller buildings and so forth. Here, it's everything around there is relatively low, and so I think a height variance is a bit more sensitive. And that ties into my main concern about this, and that is the guidelines relating to building form, massing, and variation. And I have them in front of me, and I'll just read two sentences from 36.10 sub A. Overall building siting, form, and massing should be sufficiently varied to promote interest and avoid a monotonous building image. Building walls and edges should be articulated with horizontal projections, such as trellises, extended roof overhangs, or shade fixtures. Buildings should be vertically articulated, base, middle, and top, to visually reduce massing. I don't think these buildings, are the two main buildings, meet that standard. And so my first choice would have actually been to have a motion to refer this back to staff, notwithstanding the recommendation, but to give the proponent the opportunity to see if they could change that or not, and just not proceed with it. But that's not what's in front of us, so I will not be supporting this resolution.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. I will not be supporting the staff recommendation either. I think that there are too many good intentions competing here. And we're going to have to select, or I think we're going to satisfy no one and nothing, including our livability goals for livability goals for this neighborhood node. Before I address the variances, I'd like to speak more generally to the development permit area guidelines, which I don't think they meet. And I'm looking at the guideline right at the top of the list for context and character. It seems to me that this building is too drastic for this neighborhood, and that should prompt some very sober response. I would also like to say that I hesitate to give the proposal full marks on that was 36.4A, context and character, but also 36.4B, considering form and character of the neighboring buildings, as well as 36.4D, viewscapes and solar impacts. But moving on to the heritage component, this has been described as the linchpin of this proposal. It's at the center, I think, of our difficulties. I'm glad to see a statement of significance produced, requested perhaps or offered by the developer. However, this document does not follow suggested guidelines for producing such statements, guidelines that come from Heritage BC. And I think they're good and sound, they're old. I don't want to be too unfair to the planning department or to the developer or to the author of the context statement, because part of the fault, I believe, is ours. The district does not yet have historic context information or strategic goals outlined for this type of a statement of significance, and that a report such as this might refer to. So our lack of policy in this area, in my view, has caught up with us on this project. It is also unfortunate, and this relating to the guidelines for producing such things, that no consultation was made with our local library staff or local heritage groups, and there are a few that could have helped, that could have alerted the author to 2 detailed reports on this store and its history. They're not referenced, and that is telling. It's a missed opportunity I'll come back to. I would have liked in addition or instead to see a building condition report for the store. It's 1916 building, it's in a wet area, and the author of the report I just referred to also refers to a lot of compromised features. A conventional building inspection report, in my view, should have been, we should have that before we make such fundamental decisions with this linchpin feature. Without this information and on the condition of the building and its future, and considering the severe handicap we have for planning parking, bus stop, and active transportation along Government Road because of its alignment, I am not prepared to support a heritage character covenant. I think that the whole question of the building itself, the store building, needs more information and reflection. Returning to the statement of significance, the guidelines refer to if there have been events or notable personalities or lives of persons of historical importance connected to the building. And this is really a missing piece, because there's not only well-known Squamish Nation personalities, we have Emily Carr and the Group of 7 and many extraordinary stories connected with this building. And I'm going to refer to a development permit area guideline on public art, which it does not meet, according to staff, that there should be so many opportunities to celebrate this location, if not the building. And this is, I think, important for moving forward, in my view. So in summary, I'm not convinced by the information put forward as to the role this heritage building has come to have in this proposal. I think serious questions have to be asked. Now, regarding the variances, in response to the site constraints and especially the store building, we have these heights put forward. But I think that the implications affect sense of place for the neighborhood, for the community in these 2 4-story structures. I'll cite the report to council. Staff support the height variance request as the units are being secured as moderate income rental and market rental in perpetuity, and it would improve the livability of the units. Well, I question livability, and I'm not sure that this is the place for these types of apartments. And this has been observed by several commentators including the advisory design panel, is this where these types of apartment units should be located in our community? I think this is a question needing more attention. The functions of this neighborhood node, I think, are compromised by the congestion, and that this is delivering. This is also a functions, in this case, a park or an adjacent park and important fish habitat. So I'm not convinced this is the node where this type of uses, of housing uses, should be located in this intensity. Moving to parking, I'm just not satisfied with the parking study in its consideration of the future, what might evolve with restaurant, and its past, for example, too, of the restaurant being used in the evening. And I don't think that it's advisable, the recommendation for the 8 stalls on the street, and especially with the unknown future of the 2 lots to the north. I'm not convinced by the parking strategy at all. And I think that what is at stake here is the safety of pedestrians and cyclists in this precinct. In conclusion, the neighborhood nodes, we have policies in the OCP. I'm not convinced that they're satisfied by this proposal. It is just too difficult to accommodate all of this congestion here for optimal neighborhood node functions. Safe walkability, convenient use of services, focal point and identity, to quote from the OCP, ability for commercial elements like a restaurant, for example, to evolve in future. So I believe we need to build confidence, restore confidence in our ability to plan neighborhood nodes in Squamish. And I just think that this should be and can be an exciting project for the developer, for the neighborhood and the community at large. But we have to look at, well, all of the things we're trying to accomplish here, because we're not going to satisfy anything, in my view, by proceeding as per the recommendation. Thank you. I would suggest that a new dialogue and that this DP be debated.
Thank you. Councillor French.
The bold proposal with affordable rental units and preservation of the general store with its heritage value. And I acknowledge the efforts of both the proponent and staff and the hard work that they've put into bringing this proposal to council. So the height of the new building to the north of the northern side of the property is problematic for me with its impact on the neighboring property with shading. And parking is also a significant concern for me. I believe the actual peak parking demand estimates for the commercial parking stalls is underestimated. One just needs to go there on a Saturday and see how popular the restaurant is during the day. And I don't see any accommodation for post office employees, restaurant workers, and general store employees who will choose to drive their vehicles to work. Now, if the restaurant opts to extend operating hours into the evening, I expect that parking will be an issue as visitors, residents, and evening restaurant customers all vie for a small number of parking spots. And that parking scarcity, I believe, will ensure that that restaurant will never have success after 5 p.m. So the parking variance really is a significant concern for me for this site, too significant. Also, as a side note, I'm disappointed there's no public art proposed with this project. I won't be supporting these variances.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Herford.
Thank you. My fellow councillors have voiced a lot of my concerns, but we're going to have to go back through a few of them. For the parking, I think the parking report was maybe overly optimistic would be the most generous way I could say it. I think back to 2007 and a previous incarnation of the restaurant, and I think of half-hour waits to get in during the morning, afternoon, and evening, and significantly larger demands on the parking in that area. And I know that the variance isn't talking about the loading, but I think the whole site circulation is just, it's too much pushed onto this site, and I don't think that the parking is workable. The overflow from this will be into the neighborhood, whether that be on the side of Government Road with its concerns, as Mr. Addis and the Halversons have mentioned, and also further into Cottonwood. I've already seen vehicles parking in front of Cottonwood Park and accessing this site through the little trail, but through the park. So this is a real concern, and spreads quickly through the neighborhood if there is an issue, and I believe that this will be creating an issue. I do also believe that some of this can be addressed positively through development, and this project and this configuration doesn't do that for me in regards to the parking at this point. The height, onto the height variance, I respect that of all the things that are sort of all the problems that are trying to be solved on this site, but that height, and again, particularly for me, it's the building to the on the northern part of the property, is just a dramatic jump from not only the neighborhood but from the existing building. So I won't be supporting the height variance. I do recognize that the flood levels create challenges, but I'm not ready to support a height variance there. The screening was less of an issue for me. I think the alternate solution proposed was acceptable. Now, then we get to the DP the area guidelines. I don't think that the massing and the step backs and the treatments given satisfy the DP guidelines for reasons that have been stated already in this meeting. And I do think that this project has highlighted the need for sub-area planning of the neighborhood, so that projects come forward that are going to receive broader support of the neighborhood and the community. And I mentioned this last week or the week before when we were looking at contemplating some transit-related or proximity to hub-related bonuses, and the need for the sub-area planning to sort of achieve our goals effectively. So I will not be supporting the motion as it sits.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, just as I'm listening to the discussion, I'm still wrestling with this idea that this is identified as a neighborhood hub, which to my mind means our plan is that, the neighborhood walks and bikes to the businesses here, and the businesses that are there are meant to serve the neighborhood. And we seem to be talking under assumption that, it's a destination restaurant here and people from all over the town are driving there, and that people are driving to pick up their mail and so on, which I think is contrary to our plan and our idea of a neighborhood hub. And so I'm struggling to reconcile that identification of a neighborhood hub and then the parking expectations and driving expectations we seem to have. So yeah, it's something I'm wrestling with at the moment.
Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand again? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just two brief points. I think it must be acknowledged the circumstances we've all been working in with our COVID-19 situation, where we have not had the opportunity of public information meetings as we would normally have had. And all of us have been challenged by this, and we have lacked that ability to have the dialogue that this neighborhood hub deserves. And hopefully we can address that in future. I wanted also to point out that I'm a heritage activist. I can't help myself, but we have had, there will always be a Brackendale store. There has been a Brackendale store since 1905, and it is the oldest neighborhood node in the Sea to Sky corridor. But there have been 5 Brackendale store buildings, 2 burned down. They've all been in the same vicinity, but we've in fact had 5 buildings satisfy that node. And it's a continuity, the story, and it will continue in future one way or another. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I'll just add my comments. I think on the parking variance, and this happened a few weeks ago with the other DP in Brackendale, is that our parking studies for neighborhood hubs cannot contemplate just the current use. They have to contemplate a hub for the community, which means that it could be active from morning till night. And I think somehow we need to be delivering to proponents and the folks doing these parking studies about what our assumptions might be for neighborhood hubs. Whether, you know, we're talking about neighborhood hubs including spaces for youth and seniors and all these sorts of things, like a neighborhood like house kind of concept in some respects, a gathering spot, commercial uses. And so that means to me that these hubs could be activated well into the latter part of the day. And so I think that's one of the flaws in understanding whether this parking variance for me was acceptable, was extending those peak times further into the evening and seeing the impact of that. So I would have preferred to refer this back to staff to have another look at that. In listening to my colleagues' comments, Councillor Anderson's more nuanced discussion of the heritage value of this building makes me wonder if we are trying to do too much on the site and protect something that might not need protecting in the same way that we're doing it. Maybe giving these proponents a little more freedom to move on the site. I think the variance to the screening along the property line is acceptable, so I don't have a problem with that. The height is a tricky one, and I guess for me, that additional height seemed unnecessary because where this DP falls down for me is actually in the architecture, and I didn't see the value architecturally of the higher height that would justify maybe a greater impact on the neighbors or on the neighborhood in generally, more generally. I really struggled with the sort of monotonous facade and the lack of articulation, whether through color or some sort of design feature. They just feel like big buildings, and for that reason too, I think it would have been a preference to just refer that back to staff to see if we could figure out a way to not include all of that height variance and figure out a way to more gently integrate these buildings, which feel quite industrial to me, into this neighborhood. And so, you know, where I think I could have been able to support the variances proposed with a little more detail, I'm not sure we met the DP area guidelines generally. And that's why I was surprised that the preferred option was to actually defeat this DP rather than consider referring it back to staff. So I won't support the motion on the floor. I actually do feel this needs a little bit more work, but maybe not to the extent of defeating it. But I'm not okay with it going forward as is. So I will call the question. All those in favor and any opposed. And so I have Councillor Pettengill, Anderson, Race, Herford, and Elliott opposed. So motion fails.
Should I double check with Councillor?
Councillor French, did you vote in favor or opposed? You froze a bit there.
I'm voting opposed, please.
That's what I thought. Councillor French also opposes, motion fails. I'm going to go to the corporate officer for a minute here, because with DPs, we have to get to a place, and we're not there with this motion that has just failed. So
the motion to not that was on the floor was to authorize it, but now you need a motion to deny the permit.
Or refer it back to staff, which even that may not be staff's preferred option, that is an option.
Yeah. But you need a decision.
We need a decision one way or the other. Councillor Race.
I'll move that we refer it back to staff. I'll speak to it briefly. Seconded.
It is seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Yeah.
And as I said earlier, thank you. As I said earlier, notwithstanding the alternatives we were given at the start, I think the proponent will then have the option of trying to meet some of the comments, or alternatively just not proceeding with it, which is more or less the same as having it just defeated. So I think so. So I think at least gives them that option of trying to deal with some of these things.
Thank you. Any other comments? Councillor Pettengill?
Yeah, thank you. This was my preferred option. From my perspective, there aren't major issues. There are enough not to approve it as is, but I'm hoping that there are things we can work through. Councillor Anderson's, some of the points about the importance or not of protecting that store maybe makes this more significant change, a more significant change possibly, which opens up possibly a lot more options. But I think this is the way to proceed, and I hope that we actually can find a way to get something fairly close to this approved, because I think a lot of great things are proposed here.
Yeah, I'm going to support this motion because I do believe it gives the proponent some room to move rather than simply defeating it, and provides more options for them to consider rather than simply defeating it. There have been a lot of thoughtful comments, and I think they listened really well to the community and tried to incorporate the feedback they received quite well. I think this evening council's added another layer to that conversation, and so I'd rather see the proponent have the option to reconsider some of the design elements before deciding that they simply don't want to proceed with this particular DP. Councillor Stoner.
Thank you, through the chair. I will put this motion. I obviously put the first one forward. I really hope that the proponent hears the comments that have been made, that there seems to be some general support for the direction. I would have concerns if the proponent chose to walk away from the table and demolish the building and build, as per code, a few square buildings on those sites. So I just want to voice my opinion there, that I hope that the developer hears that there's general intent or support to stay at the table and have those discussions to see how we can make those amendments that might bring forward the changes to the feel of the building and respond to some of the neighborhood concerns there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to everyone who was with us at Brennan Park, on the live stream or on WebEx or on the phone. I know these are not our usual times, but I really appreciate everyone's participation through those means. And now I will entertain a motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor Stoner. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.